Guys, welcome to a new episode of Beer, Politics, and Books. I'm your host, Ryan, and we're only a week into President Trump's first term, and I, like many other people, are probably wondering about now who the voted for this guy. I can only personally name about 5 people who actually voted for Donald Trump, and according to my Facebook wall, none of my internet friends seem to like him either. So if none of my internet friends seem to like him, and no one I know actually voted for him, how did he win? It's like when all of your friends are saying that they hate Jen, yet somehow she gets invited to everything. Someone in this group is lying and inviting her. The reason you may not actually personally know any Trump voters may have more to do with where you live than anything else. This is a map of all of the counties that either voted Democratic or Republican in the last election. Now, while technically Donald Trump won more geographic area than Hillary Clinton did, when you combine this with the popular vote, what it actually tells you is that Hillary Clinton is winning in more densely populated urban areas, whereas Donald Trump is winning in more rural, less densely populated areas. So why is it that rural areas overwhelmingly support Donald Trump? Does their love of NASCAR endear them to things that make a lot of noise but ultimately go nowhere? Well, this is the topic of today's book, The Politics of Resentment and Rural Consciousness by Kathrine Cramer. The author of the book went around rural communities in Wisconsin and asked for their perspectives on different political issues. And this is actually super relevant because Wisconsin, for the first time since 1988, went for a Republican candidate. She realizes that people in rural areas view politics through what she refers to as rural consciousness, which just means that the way they make sense of the world is generally determined through their perspective on their own communities. An aspect of rural consciousness is the belief that government ultimately doesn't care about them. They believe that government is spending most of their time, energy, and resources on urban areas, and they're ultimately left out. A lot of people the author interviewed believe that the government would simply just tax them, take their money, and only spend it on the big cities in their state and give nothing back to their communities.
It's a conspiracy. That's what it is. A conspiracy!
A big reason people believe this is because rural economies have been hit significantly harder than urban economies. Median income and unemployment are significantly worse in rural areas in comparison to urban areas. The reason for this is because of macroeconomic trends that has replaced manual labor with machines and has been more focused towards a knowledge-based economy, which has helped cities and hurt small towns. However, the way people make sense of their economic depravity in rural communities is simply that the government does not care about them. They keep taking all their tax dollars and only spending it in big cities, and that's why they're having so many problems. Now, while people in rural communities believe that the government isn't spending any money on them, the truth isn't exactly that simple. The author looked at the amount of state and federal revenue that urban communities and rural communities get and found that on a per capita basis, meaning per person, rural communities actually get more money than urban communities. It's kind of like how people believe that Kobe Bryant was an amazing clutch shooter with ice water running through his veins, even though the statistics never really backed it up. However, even though the government spends more money per person in rural areas in comparison to urban areas, people in rural communities have significantly inferior services in comparison to urban areas, and this is due to the economies of scale. For instance, it is much cheaper for the government to provide one giant school for 1,000 kids than it is to provide 30 small schools for 30 kids apiece. This is due to the efficiency and economies of scale gained by making bigger things. Not only that, but the school with 1,000 kids may need to hire, say, 100 teachers. And with those 100 teachers, they can teach a broad variety of different subjects, such as French, German, or even any AP course. However, if you go to a school with only 30 students, which most people in rural communities do, then it would be impractical to hire 100 teachers so those small schools get access to the same course load as the big schools do, which means that small schools may only have 3 teachers, which means limited access to AP courses or different language courses. So even though technically they're actually getting more money per capita in rural areas than in urban areas, the quality of the product they're getting from the government is significantly less, which makes them believe they're getting shafted. Another aspect of rural consciousness is a hostility to people who work for the government. And the reason is because people in rural communities make significantly less than public workers. Public workers and teachers don't really make that much money in in comparison to people living in urban communities, no one would ever look at a teacher and think, that dude is definitely ballin'.
Cash money, I'm gonna make it rain.
However, in rural communities, because public workers and teachers are paid on a pay scale regardless of where they're living, they can sometimes be making the top 10th percentile of income in a rural area, which breeds a lot of hostility amongst rural communities because they believe their hard-earned tax dollars are going to pay a teacher's salary who ultimately makes more money than they do.
I'm really rich, I'll show you that.
Which is why when the governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, took on the teachers union and decided to cut back benefits for them, there was a broad support amongst the rural communities. Because to them, why should their tax dollars be going to fund teachers' healthcare plans and pension plans when they themselves can't afford it? People in rural communities don't necessarily believe that the government is bad for the economy, but rather that the government is going to ignore them anyways. So why should they pay more taxes expanding the government if it's not going to help them? I think Donald Trump won these areas because he tapped into their feelings of resentment. Resentment of liberals in big cities who were doing so well while they were left behind. Resentful of public employees who were making more money than they were. But more so, resentful of a government that they felt had abandoned them. Overall, I give this book 3.5 stars out of 5. My one issue with this book was the fact that the author of the book has a tendency to write this more as a research paper than a non-fiction book, which means that she spends a lot of time explaining to the reader how she collected data for her book instead of just giving you the data. So anyways, guys, that's my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, shout out to my friend Michael who actually gave me the suggestion for this book. If you guys have any suggestions, leave a comment down below. And stay tuned next time for more book reviews on BPB.